The discussion for today is science and religion. I cannot imagine a more conflated and misunderstood topic in public discourse. Most fail to understand in debates of belief and doubt because each has a presentation of religion and science in their thinking. In most cases the presentations do not align with the reality or usage of such terms. There are, from my research, 16 definitional frames brought to each term. There is no time to work through each frame. But it is important to say that each framing is both empathic and critical, and all have truth and fallacies. Any of these frames can be made to work for a definition of religion or science, but only if all parties understand what is being communicated. There is a more basic way of communicating the details, but we need to liberate ourselves from the slavery to memes. We market well on simple slogans and snappy quotes, but if the process does not take us into a certain conversation, where we can structure details together, seeking a particular fit for a particular purpose, with an eye on the emerging schematic horizon, we have come up short, so as to speak nonsense in the silence that follows. Understanding definitions and the usage of terms is not an academic aim. James Baldwin understood this when he was debating racism in America, and said, "I have a feeling that a great many words have been floating around this table which need to be redefined. And that, by the way, is a problem which faces this entire country." Timothy Fitzgerald provides a way into the conversation. He stated, "The problem today, as I see it, derives from this radical redescription of the meaning referring to historical review of the church-state controversy, not only of religion, but of the Commonwealth and the civil authority. For now the dominant top is not religion as encompassing Christian truth. It concerns religion as it stands in various binary oppositions, religion and state, religion and politics, religion and economics, religion and civic society, and religion and science. The usage of religion in the plural as an apparently objective, neutral, descriptive term for other people's beliefs and practices becomes systematically institutionalized in the 19th century with the development of the so-called science of religion and comparative religion. Fitzgerald is referring to how religion and science is understood, both in present and past terms. One needs to understand that both approaches are legitimate, but can lead to error if the relationship is not perceived. Often the understanding of the past is a projection of our present mindset. That is legitimate when we are asking present questions, such as how did we get here? The error is not to perceive the layering of the present upon the past. Equally problematic is if we assume there is unfiltered access to any origins, or assume that the origins explains the whole story. The origin of much in Western philosophy goes back to Plato and Aristotle. Each of the ancient philosophers offers a touchstone in understanding the terms of religion and science. It really depends upon if you work your way up or down the schemas. And it depends whether the focus is on what is constant or what is fluid. There are two qualified terms which will add the understanding. The first is civic religion, and we can also refer to social science. The definitional frames go back to when those who defined such terms worked both in religion and science. Here there is not much difference between them. Indeed, in this era of the 17th century, theology was considered the queen of the sciences. However, like the fundamental differences between Plato and Aristotle, we have to understand the distinct difference between the Hobbesian and the Lockean interpretation of religion and science. Like Plato, Thomas Hobbes had the downward pressure on civic religion and social science. It was not unlawful for Abraham, when any of his subjects should pretend private vision, or spirit, or other revelation from God, for the countenancing of any doctrine which Abraham should forbid, or when they followed, or adhered to any such pretender, to punish them. And consequently that it is lawful now for the sovereign to punish any man that shall oppose his private spirit against the laws, for he hath the same place in the commonwealth, that Abraham had in his own family. Like Aristotle, John Locke had the upward pressure on civic religion and social science. The business of true religion is quite another thing. It is not instituted in order to the erecting of an external pomp, nor to the obtaining of ecclesiastical dominion, nor to the exercising of compulsive force, but to the regulating of men's lives, according to the rules of virtue and piety. I esteem it above all things necessary to distinguish exactly the business of civil government from that of religion and to settle the just bounds that lie between the one and the other. The second qualified term is natural religion, and we can also refer to natural science. Again, there are distinct differences. with two definitional framing between Hegel and Kant. And we still have not yet arrived at the modern divorce between the two terms, if such a divorce ever occurred. Both Hegel and Kant are a challenge to read, so please be patient, and listen carefully. Hegel stated, "It has been the work of spirit throughout thousands of years to work out the notion or conception of religion, and to make it the subject of consciousness." In this work the movement begins from immediacy and nature, and these must be overcome. Immediacy is the natural element. Consciousness, however, is elevation above nature. Natural consciousness is sensuous consciousness, as the natural will is passion. It is the individual which wills itself in accordance with its naturalness, its particularity. It is sensuous knowing and sensuous willing. But religion is the relation of spirit to spirit, the knowledge by spirit of spirit in its truth, and not in its immediacy or naturalness. Hegel takes the subjectivist and empathetic direction. Famously, Kant comes at it in the objectivist and critical pathway. We very often hear complaints of the shallowness of the present age, and of the decay of profound science. But I do not think that those which rest upon a secure foundation, such as mathematics, physical science, etc., in the least deserve this reproach, but that they rather maintain their ancient fame, and in the latter case, indeed, far surpass it. The same would be the case with the other kinds of cognition, if their principles were but firmly established. Null in the absence of this security, indifference, doubt, and finally, severe criticism are rather signs of a profound habit of thought. Our age is the age of criticism, to which everything must be subjected. The sacredness of religion, and the authority of legislation, are by many regarded as grounds of exemption from the examination of this tribunal. But, if they are exempted, they become the subjects of just suspicion, and cannot lay claim to sincere respect, which reason accords only to that which has stood the test of a free and public examination. Plato and Aristotle introduced the conception of religion and science in terms of ideal and nature. John Locke and Thomas Hobbes introduced the conception of religion and science in terms of the individual and the social. Hegel and Kant introduced the conception of religion and science in terms of consciousness and objective reasoning. All of that comes to either greater clarity or entanglement in what we understand as experience and language. It is then William James and Ludwig Wittgenstein who hopefully provided the clarity. For William James, it is in the framing of natural religion and social science. For Ludwig Wittgenstein, it is in the framing of civic religion and social science. The arguments of natural science continued as definitional framings for itself and religion, but the phenomenology of experience and language becomes so natural that the category becomes meaningless as a definition. That is the true divorce. Neither religion nor science have any a prior claim on each other. For both James and Wittgenstein abandon metaphysics for different descriptions of religious and scientific experience and language. James explains, in the matter of religions it is particularly easy to distinguish the two orders of question. Every religious phenomenon has its history and its derivation from natural antecedents. What is nowadays called the higher criticism of the Bible is only a study of the Bible from this existential point of view, neglected too much by the earlier church. Under just what biographic conditions did the sacred writers bring forth their various contributions to the holy volume? And what had they exactly in their several individual minds, when they delivered their utterances? These are manifestly questions of historical fact, and one does not see how the answer to them can decide offhand the still further question, of what use should such a volume, with its manner of coming into existence so defined, be to us as a guide to life and a revelation? There can be no doubt that as a matter of fact a religious life, exclusively pursued, does tend to make the person exceptional and eccentric. I speak not now of your ordinary religious believer, who follows the conventional observances of his country, whether it be Buddhist, Christian, or Mohammedan. These experiences we can only find in individuals for whom religion exists not as a dull habit, but as an acute fever rather. Wittgenstein takes on a more poetic explanation, my attitude towards him, referring to a friend who says he isn't an automaton, is an attitude towards a soul. I am not of the opinion that he is a soul. Religion teaches that the soul can exist when the body has disintegrated. Now do I understand this teaching? Of course I understand it. I can imagine plenty of things in connection with it. And haven't pictures of these things been painted? And why should such a picture be only an imperfect rendering of the spoken doctrine? Why should it not do the same service as the words? And it is the service which is the point. If the picture of thought in the head can force itself upon us, then why not much more that of thought in the soul? The human body is the best picture of the human soul. And how about such an expression as, "In my heart I understood when you said that," pointing to one's heart? Does one, perhaps, not mean this gesture? Of course one means it. Or is one conscious of using a mere figure? Indeed not. It is not a figure that we choose, not a simile, yet it is a figurative expression. By our focus on Plato and Aristotle, Locke and Hobbes, Hegel and Kant, James and Wittgenstein, and focused on what is natural, as well as what is social or civil, we have reduced our definitional list to 8 frames on religion, and 8 frames on science. None of these frames will deliver the final word, but by surveying across the territory we can, hopefully, bring greater understanding,